This screencast is to support the preparation of the lesson 20 from Language to Go Intermediate, the full reference being Language to Go Intermediate by R. Wileman, W-I-L-E-M-A-N, and A. Crace, C-R-A-C-E, Longman, 2004. And you're going to need a few things for this particular lesson. There's the student's book here, and there's an audio file. There's one page of teacher's book notes, grammar notes from the back of the student's book, and here is the tape script so that you know what's on the audio just here for lesson 20. And you've also got an extra piece of material. This comes from the Teacher's Resource and Extra Resources book, and it's an additional speaking task which would go at the end of the lesson. So I'll tell you more about that in the general information. So let's have a look at the materials. The topic is food, or always a popular one. We've got a bit of listening, a bit of vocabulary in the first part of the lesson, and it leads on to the grammar focus over here in number 6, which is looking at verb patterns. Some verbs are always followed by the ing form when followed by another verb. Other verbs are always followed by the to infinitive when they're followed by another verb. So that's what we're trying to practice today. So a bit of a crossover of vocabulary and grammar, I suppose. So the lesson kicks off with some vocabulary and some speaking. You can start with a lead-in of any kind, really. You could have that question in number 2 there. What did you eat for lunch yesterday? You could even use that as a warmer. You could use a Padlet activity for everybody to write down what they had for lunch. You could encourage people to tell the truth or to lie about what they had for lunch, and then they'd say, and then people have to guess whether they think it's true or a lie. Just a bit of speaking to get people started, really. And then I think it would be a good idea to look at some vocabulary. This vocabulary here is very nice and focuses on some of the items that are in the listening, for example, raw. So it does clarify that, which is useful. You can do this activity as is. Do a couple of them as an example first. You want to get students talking about the difference between the words, and then in the feedback you'll want to clarify the meaning, make sure they know the form, whether they're adjectives or verbs or nouns, and drill any that would be useful for pronunciation. Raw is classically a very difficult word for students to say. Boil, roast, those diphthongs are difficult sound. Vegetarian, where's the stress? Vegan, stress on the different parts. So there's quite a lot going on with this vocabulary. If you feel you want some different vocabulary, one interesting area to go for is idioms connected with food. For example, to take something with a pinch of salt, or to have your cake and eat it, or for something to be a piece of cake, or for things to be described as cheesy. Pretty good idioms that go with food vocabulary. You can introduce some, match the idiom to the meaning, and then have a gap fill, something like that. So feel free to make up your own vocabulary task if you'd like to at this stage. And here's the listening. 2 individuals talking. I think Takanori's first, and then Gabriella. You've got all the stages for a receptive skills lesson here. First, raise interest in the topic, which exercise 3 is doing here. What do you think is in Takanori's fridge? What do you think in Gabriella's fridge? I often show a picture of these 2 people, elicit where they're from and then what they think they might have in their fridge, get pairs or individual students to write down what they think is going to be in the fridge. You can use the whiteboard, divide it down the middle, write things from Takanori's fridge on one side, Gabriella's fridge on the other side. You can have different pictures of different foods, and they have to divide them into 2 columns, what they think is in Takanori's fridge, what they think is in Gabriella's. There's a lot of ways here to activate schemata and get people ready to listen. And then they listen and check, see, were your predictions correct? Are you right about Takanori's fridge and Gabriella's fridge? There you go. And then there's a more difficult task down here. There's true, false for Takanori and for Gabriella. It's not too tricky, I have to say. So if you've got quite strong students, you might want to read the audio script, listen to it, and make some more difficult tasks, perhaps in true, false, some more true, false statements to add to it. One piece of vocabulary that I want you to check before they listen would be actually two things. Manage to do. If you pre-teach this verb, it will really help you out with the grammar later. So pre-teach manage and pre-teach spend time as well. I think that would be really useful. And otherwise, I don't see any particular pitfalls with this listening. If you are bored of doing listenings, you want to do it as reading, then do that, because it's two short texts. You can keep the tasks exactly the same, but I think you would need to make the true false a bit more difficult, particularly if you're doing it as reading. And the students could read both of the texts. If you want to make it into a jigsaw, you could do that. So have your students in two different rooms. One room read about Takanori, one room read about Gabriella, and then get them back in one room together and get one or two students from the Takanori group to tell the Gabriella group about Takanori, and two or three people who read about Gabriella to tell the group about Takanori. If you're in a face-to-face classroom, of course, you can just have them separate to do the reading and then pair them up to tell each other. It's a way of practicing reading skills and then introducing some speaking skills as well, transforming the information that they read into spoken language. So there's a few different options for how to deal with this listening here. This listening is the context for the grammar to come. So if this listening isn't done in the lesson, it means that the teacher doing the grammar would need to come up with a different context. So do bear that in mind when you're planning. And here is the grammar. Okay, so after certain verbs we use the ing, and after certain verbs we use to do. So it's all about the first verb. Don't get confused and think it's about the infinitives and the ings. It's about the first verb. So for example, in these two sentences here, I've decided to visit some other countries. Okay, we're thinking about the verb decide. Is decide usually followed by to do something, or is decide usually followed by doing something? I've decided to visit. You can see it's usually followed by the to form. This is a correct sentence. The verb avoid. Do you avoid to do something, or do you avoid doing something? You can see that it's ing. Obviously, you can use them in different ways. So I can say I avoided the crowd. I can have avoid plus a noun. But if I'm going to use a verb after the verb avoid, it has to be in the ing form. I don't avoid to do something. So you've got an attempt at guided discovery here. It's a bit limited, but it's at least attempting to get the students to think about what is correct and what is not. It's a bit overly easy, isn't it? Because once you've looked at one, you look at the other one. I think I might be tempted to make it a little bit more complex. Maybe I would do a bit like I've just done for you for this screencast, is give a few different options. So I've decided to visit some other countries. I've decided visiting some other countries. I've decided visit some other countries. Which one is correct? And the same for avoid. Avoid cooking, avoid to cook, avoid cook. Which one is correct? I give the students just a little bit more to look at and a little bit more to do. And then I'd get them to do question 1 and question 2. Okay. Then we want to look at other verbs. And all of these verbs are in the listening script, and the example sentences are clear in the teacher's book notes as well. So use the context to help the students with the meaning. I sometimes do this in 2 different stages. So I worry that whether my students know all of these verbs. I know they know decide and offer, but I'm not too sure about keep on and give up and manage and spend time. Hopefully spend time and manage have been dealt with earlier through the listening. But for the others, I would make a matching task. Have the verbs down one side of the page, meanings down the other side, and the students match them together. I wouldn't bother with the easy ones like decide and plan and offer, but for the others, I would have a matching task. After that matching task has been done and you have checked meaning, used some CCQs, done some drilling of the difficult ones like manage, that is very tricky, give up, you've got consonant to vowel linking there, catenation if you're feeling fancy, final consonant meeting an initial vowel, give up. So once you've dealt with some meaning and some pronunciation, then it's time to look at form. So I usually get the students to divide the verbs into two different groups. Which ones do they think are followed by an ing? Which ones do they think are followed by an infinitive? And then we check. Okay, so then you end up with two different groups of verbs. So it's time to practice now. We've got a simple control practice here just to make sure that the students are on top of the rules. They should find it relatively simple as long as they've got their two different groups of verbs. So let them try it by them, do an example together, let them try it by themselves, talk together and then clarify. And then we need some more complex practice after that. So, two choices for the freer practice. This is the first one, a simple group discussion, absolutely fine. It uses some of the vocabulary in it. Look, there's offer, and we've got a void in there somewhere as well, I think. Yeah, there it is in number 6. But the other vocabulary is not in there. So the danger is that the students can do this task quite happily and not use any of the verbs that were introduced earlier. So you want to try to force the issue of getting them to use the verbs, get them to write a list of the verbs, and then when they use them in the speaking discussion, they tick them off and they see how many verbs they can use. Or you make it a listening activity where two students talk and the third one notes down the verbs that they use and then tells them which ones they've used, and then they can change around and different people speak and somebody else listens. But you need to find a way of sort of forcing them to try to use the vocabulary. Otherwise, it's quite easy to avoid using the vocabulary, not avoid to use, as you can notice. Let's have a look at another alternative for this. So this is the extra activity that I referred to at the beginning of the screencast. It's another discussion task, basically, but might be more interesting topics for your students, or you can make up a few of these cards for yourself. In the classroom, the students have the cards and they turn them over. In an online situation, perhaps you could make a slide with 4 to 6 of these items on it, and then the students work in small groups to discuss the topics, and they need to try to use the verbs. So again, you need to try to force the issue of using the verbs and having a list that they tick as they use them, or having somebody write down the verbs that they use when they're speaking would be really useful. In either of the activities, you as the teacher need to set it up nice and clearly, and then you need to monitor and note errors and examples of good language use for post-fluency error correction. Okay, it's really essential that we give the students some feedback on accuracy at the end of this task. So at the end of the speaking, whichever one you choose to use, do some feedback on ideas first. So, did you learn anything new? Did you agree with everybody? Tell me one thing you learned about your partner, something like that. And then you can say, right, I noticed some good language use and some errors. Let's look at it together, and then share your Word document where you've written your correct and incorrect sentences, or type some errors into the chat box and see if students can correct it. But we need some focus on accuracy at the end of this fluency-based task. So hopefully an enjoyable lesson for your students. Always a good topic, and I think the grammar focus is also very useful for students and one that they may not have thought about before.